almost as though they were irrational, drugged. An engineer sitting there apparently oblivious to everything, a woman strangled, a crewman with a phaser pistol in his hand.
He'd used the computer room as if it were an amusement gallery.
And a fully clothed man frozen to death in a shower. If the image wasn't so ugly, it'd be laughable.
Well, I am slightly naked, half naked actually, in bed. Not taking a shower, mind you. Just relaxing. Oh gosh. I got a theory. I'm not sure. Does it get mentioned about the EQ? That EQ, you know, a room, every size is trial and error. And, you know, sometimes I put the microphones, you know, at this so-called main listening position, you know, money seat. There's no money seat really. Sweet spot. No. The way I see it is, if you play pink noise from, say, one speaker, and you know that the frequency response has been tested in an anechoic chamber, and it comes out nice and smoothly, flat. Flat. You know, it doesn't have too many peaks, and you know, at certain specific frequencies in the bass mid range, where it's appearing to make the lower frequencies look shallow in level. And then you get up through to getting near to the high frequencies, and it starts looking a little bit, in my case that is, and my system, it starts then looking a little bit, that's a bit peaky by, probably 5 dB there, from 1 up to about maybe 2.5 kilohertz range. So I can see where it's just shallowing a little bit down here in the frequency after to 2.5, and then getting up to 5 kilohertz, and it's shallowing a bit, kind of like wiggly. And I'm thinking, and I'm thinking, okay, so what if I were just to move the microphone, play the pink noise, and just move the microphone lengthways, forward to backwards, lengthways of the room, and until I see roughly where the lower frequencies have minimal null dips, so to speak. And then I'm just going to say, okay, I can see how the rest of the frequency response is looking. I'm going to leave it there. Okay, next thing I'll do is observe the frequency, you know, how it looks. And it's just like a radio tuner dial on when you go on the CB radio. My cat Magic's just been to the vet today. He's dropped weight by about 1.4 kilogram due to this little bugger. So, like, when being on the CB radio, so go on, is there any action on there at the moment? Oh, look. Got the Yankees, the Americans. So if I go on sideband, probably lower sideband, I guess. That's KC shift. So what that's doing there is changing the frequency. So it's like having the microphone in a position, having the microphone in this position and moving it sideways, the width of the room. Just move it just a little bit up this way and that way while observing the frequency response until I get it almost like evenish, so to speak. And then I think that's roughly about the best position for that microphone, you know? And I can see how the frequency looks. And it's a little bit, it doesn't look like how it does on the amplifier, where it looks very smooth. If you do a frequency sweep, it's very smooth, perfect. In the amplifier, that is, if it was Tron miniaturized and put inside the amplifier, it's perfect. The same with the processor, the the frequency response is perfect. It has, all these peak frequencies, and it, modulation of the frequencies changing when music, film, dialogue, it moves around. But it moves around in a more purer way. It's what's going on the CB radio? What's going on the side there? All right, someone's playing some music. I'm not sure if it's on the AM. I'm surprised there's a little bit chock-a-block on the sideband. I'm not going to bother. They sound like they're just down the road, and that's that direction, about anywhere to about 15,000 miles, anything to about 25,000 mile distance away. Depending on the east and the west coast, That's in that direction. And the signals are going up into the ionosphere. And the sporadic energy readings, port side aft, could be an impulse turn. Those conditions are very good today. And it's only coming up to about 3:30. So that's for 3:30, 2:30, 1:30, 12:30, 11:30. 10:30. It's only 10:30 on the east coast of the United States. 10:39. 9:30. 8:30. 7. I think it'd be about roughly 7:30 on the west coast, because that's a little bit further. That's a few more hours back that way in time. and yet there's no time lag. You don't get any of that what you get on these phone things. This is all real time, moving at the speed of light, and yet you hear the sound at the speed of sound. Channel 6. This is the power channel. This is the bragging channel. This is where you brag, how powerful your home cinema is. But have you got THX? No. Well, then you haven't got a power home THX. You haven't got a power home theatre then. Yeah, this is where you brag. Okay. I've only got 200 watts. Yeah, I've got presently now my THX cinema now has gone up a little bit. It's about now 40 kilowatt. Wow. If only I had 40 kilowatt for the CB radio, my signal would get over that way easy. It would cut through a lot of the signals. I mean, look at the signal here, the dB level. Look at that dB level. Bloody hell. That's often common, right, to when someone's local or a few miles away and they give that sort of signal range. And yet they're probably using about, typical Americans, they're probably using an average like maybe half a kilowatt to about anywhere to maybe 2 kilowatt. So that boosts the your dB signal up, along with the sporadic energy reading in the ionosphere, and then that helps to carry the signal. It's like getting a stone and you throw it like that, and it skips along the water, bush, 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 yeah, and then it dips. Eventually, that's kind of like how the skip is on the radio, the skip, because it's skipping. along the the ionosphere, if that makes sense. But there's so many stations on this channel, on this frequency. I guess this station here I can't really hear because there's so much distortion, because there are other signals, and what they do is they interact and they kind of clash and make the signal a bit but that's what listening is. Yeah, so anyway, I'll turn it off because I'm not interested in transmitting. I know my station can get over there. I know my station can reach America, so because it did that last month, I think it was, or the month before, and about a year or so before that. So I know my station can reach there. It's just it's like you have a movie soundtrack with layers and layers and layers of soundtrack elements, Foley, music, sound effects and such, and you got like Captain Kirk taking his glasses off, when he's in the shuttle pod going up to the Enterprise, and he takes his glasses off. He's got that sound, if you can hear it, because you got the other sound playing Enterprise, you're clear to approach and dock, and you got someone on an intercom, and you got the music score, James Horner playing, and you got these tracks are layered, specifically, and have frequency curves and such and so forth. And so if your frequency response is not ideally flat, even though we don't hear that way, if you get it, if you listen on headphones, even though the headphones frequency response is all over the bloody place and it needs to be adjusted, but listening on our headphones is a bit more easier than listening to LCR channels, because you got to get the frequency response on matched LCR, especially when they're behind a projection screen. That's where they should be. They shouldn't be in front of a projection screen. That's just gonna sound totally rubbish. And you're only showing off a speaker, and you're only showing off speakers where I don't understand the logic of that. When you just get JBL Cinema Professional speakers, they look ugly, but they give damn good sound. Period. No if, no but, no debate, no vote. Period. They give good sound quality reproduction, and they behind the screen. And that's, you should be looking at, wow, that screen and that image, and wow, that sound is great, It's getting the modulation of the LCR signals to play as they should be if you were listening on headphones. So you listen on headphones, you only to monitor the sound, and then you take them off and then monitor again over the, to see what you might have missed or overlooked. But, when you got the like Uhura, when they're in the shuttle pod, at first I only heard like a single sound when she's clicking a button. That's Foley, okay? That's Foley. And because she's not really doing it, she's just doing movement, and sound editors put sound in to give the illusion. There might be production sound there, but it's totally the opposite to what is fabricated with sound effects. And I always thought I was hearing one sound, but giving a little bit more adjustment to the frequency response, because the way the dialogue is recorded on the mix, in the mix, it's got a foggy dialogue on left and right, but it is a discrete mix, with the center channel and everything and the surrounds. It is discrete. It's just that's typically the way that's done. Other movies are like, don't have that foggy kind of dialogue in the left, right, and they're totally isolated. All the, you choose to do that. You can make it, say, we've got the dialogue, we're going to give it a bit of foggy sound over the left and right, so to speak, for some purpose, obviously. But the sound I was hearing on stage right, I was thinking I was hearing one sound, but no. adjust it, and then I think, oh, now I hear two sounds, like a and a like a two different like button pushing sound, sort of, so to speak. And I went back at it again, did a bit more deep listening. Just like on the CB radio, you got so many stations, different amplitude output power, and you got stations over modding. Okay, and this is only mono, don't forget, on the CB radio, this is just mono. When it's Dolby Stereo, discrete mix, LCR, there's a lot of sound frequencies going on in, so that's quite a bit of listening, but it's more difficult on the CB radio because the station on the East Coast may have only standard power output from the radio, which would be typically maybe 15 watt on sideband, and he may reach me, whereas someone else, maybe a few hundred miles distant away from him, is probably using 500 watts, and his signal is booming over by about maybe 4 dB more or such, whilst the other station is say at maybe 3 dB, and the other stations, I don't know, about maybe 7-8 dB higher. Anyway, so it's like listening for those frequencies, and then I start hearing free sounds on the, there's like a kind of sort of sound I'm hearing. I think, oh right, there's so much detail, and then it's getting the center channel playing, and that's only like the right channel and the center channel playing, with the left channel muted, and because the output level on the dialogue level on the center is a little bit higher up, and it's like, or is it really that high? And it's got kind of, it's like saying moving the microphone around, and then I got it a little bit further away from the front seating, so I'm only looking at a specific energy of the sound field of the frequencies, and then sort of then adjusting, and then think, okay, make the levels, get them smooth, so it, even though the center's there and the microphone's there, center's up there, the right channel's over there by about a distance of only 3 foot away. No, about 4 foot distance away, horizontally, and then looking at it diagonally, it'd be probably just a fraction by a few inches or so. Those inches make differences because in frequency and what you got to hear, listen to. Where you're sat as well is because you can't get it always pleasing. It's not possible. You can only get it the consistency, so you can try and get a sort of sound going from one pink noise playing. So if you output pink noise on one speaker and it sounds like that, and then you go to the center, it's like the center sounds like a little bit too toppy or so forth, and then the other channel sounds a little bit almost the same as the left channel, but a little bit less in other frequencies because of the where you're sat. What sound is arriving at this ear? Your mind is saying and then sound arriving at this ear. And when you kind of do this, turning your head, or just put an earplug in your ear and listen with one ear, yeah, because you can move around like a mono microphone. Then, if you're using 2 ears, you might as well have 2 microphones and have them spaced apart a little bit, and have them going through the audio mixer with the pan pots adjusted, and then move those microphones around slightly, so one microphone's this side is picking that sound up at this time arrival, and the other one's picking it up at this time arrival. And it's just basically just getting the time frequency, just the level as possible as you can You would never ever get it spot on. It's impossible. You could get it spot on headphones, and then, because you put headphones on, you will walk around the room, the sound doesn't change, it stays the same. Pink noise, sine wave, listening to a movie or music, it stays the same. You move around with it, a loudspeaker, it's going to change. Just as I would walk around the room talking to myself, and I can hear my voice changing as it gets near to a wall, move away from a wall. It's the same thing. It's not a big deal, everybody, You can't undo it. It is what it is. I hate that word. It is what it is. I absolutely hate that. But you can't equalise it. You can only equalise it in a certain area, and that's it. It's down to the rest of who's listening in the audience. I doubt all THX cinemas are all perfect, and even though they are a lot better than bloody IMAX rubbish, because they don't use baffle walls in IMAX, so you'd get less bass. They just crank everything up so bloody ridiculously loud, and most people, they just say they come out with a bloody ringing ears. Oh, what? If you got that, then that's not good, because then now you got tinnitus, because it went over the level of threshold of the individual's hearing, or where you were sat, or I'll get to something like maybe in another video, because it's interesting to look at how every seat in a cinema, right, given all the technology that's on hand now, with it's so easy to do REM and do multitude of frequency graph sweeps, so you got overlays and you can look at everything literally. The same with, I could do the frequency response where I've got it, my microphone's at present, and then next I could then just put the microphone in around all the seats, do a frequency sweep. But I'm thinking, no, I'm not going to make any bloody adjustment. I'm just going to leave it where it is at the moment. It seems to be working. It's okay on the bass. It's not too boomy, because I've taken out some of the peak frequencies that have been exaggerated by the room, which is compressing and morphing like, face CGI morphing. And you change the shape and everything, because the room just changes the shape. The floor, the ceiling, the walls, they alter the frequencies shape. Take it outdoors, look at the pink noise, and it's like, oh, it's the opposite. It's different. It's better. But you got a bad noise floor outdoors, so there's the problem. You get a good frequency response, better than what you're going to get indoors, but you got noise level outside. You got a noise floor that's so damn high, so you could play movies outside at depending on where the location is, and you could probably play them outside, and it look strange, obviously, but the frequency response would be better, because it can breathe. It's like, it can breathe, and then if you were to actually outdoors put in boundaries, specifically, elevate these high rising elevation walls, artificial walls, and then look at the frequency response then, and then it's just suddenly changed, but you leave the roof off, and then you can see what it looks like, where there's boundaries near the speakers, and then it's just changing the frequency response in the horizontal width slightly. Of course, they're pretty near to the ground planes, the flooring or the ground there area, and then you put an artificial roof on top, and then you look at then how the frequency response then gets changed. It's just simple math and common sense of, not really common sense, but experience. If I could raise my ceiling height a bit higher, but would not for overhead surrounds, because you wouldn't need too many speakers then for overhead surround, because the higher it is up, the less speakers you would need, seriously, because they would have a better radiation pattern over. You'd only end up having a single speaker, because you can't have two stereo speakers because they're so high up, and depending on the width and the length area of what it would be, the sound of stereo would just sound like mono. It would just collapse in on itself. It would just fold in on itself and sound like mono. It would have a kind of but you can't really tell for sure because it's too far up away from you. Just as being too far back in a room, I see a lot of these home theatres in USA's home basements, typical, and some of those seating are so far back in the room, with rooms that are 30 foot long and something, and the seating's way back here, and I'm thinking it's going to sound rubbish, period. They don't have the experience like I do. You can't really tell them or explain it to them too well, because they I would say put that seating a little bit forward, crying out loud, and then you'll start getting better stereo imaging. The further back you are, that stereo imaging of LCR will just get narrow, and it takes very careful planning in a room so you can still get a good stereo. It's not impossible, but most setups in homes typically with mismatched speakers, typical Calypso speakers, large towers and a dinky little centre, and this brainwashing, this misleading by all these forum sites and these magazines. Whoever came up with the concept of a centre channel needs to be fired, because that is totally, utterly ruined and misleading the home cinema sort of thing. That's like when THX were coming out with things in the 90s, mostly the speakers were matched. And now, today, it's like they've changed their tune. It's like they'll certify anything. If it passes this and that, they'll certify it. And I'm seeing speakers that don't even look identical sometimes, with certain brands that are being submitted for THX bubble bath certification, because they will certify soap, bubble bath, cornflakes, you name it. They would certify the bloody thing. It's ridiculous today. What's my cat up to? It's kind of like that. It's kind of like getting your home cinema sounding like an SR-71 Blackbird. Ain't that cool aircraft? It's kind of getting it like that. So those afterburners really kick in. Actually, the afterburners sound better on the movie Final Approach than they do in that rubbish Top Gun Maverick overrated Atmos rubbish. Really, the Atmos on that overhead movie only utilises height number 2, which is middle overhead surround, and it has a little bit of a couple of seconds on height number 1, no height number 3 on it. And I'm thinking, why only a couple of seconds of height number 1? That makes absolute no sense. They mixed a rubbish movie the movie was over budget. I think maybe it probably must have gone over budget slightly, and it made its money back because you got fanboys out there. I only bought the movie and I've only watched it once, and I thought it had potential right at the beginning, but when I noticed right a little bit more into the opening of the movie, then I started noticing with the overhead some bad sound continuity that didn't seem to match what I'm looking at visually. So you're trying to create a psychoacoustic illusion, and I'm hearing voices like PA sounds, like air traffic controller sound on height number 2, middle overhead, and it made no sense because I know somewhere on that aircraft carrier that the com tower or whatever it is, the tower bridge, and that is over on one side of the aircraft carrier. They don't have PA speakers located round it. If they are speakers, they'll probably be positioned elsewhere. But other sounds like then where you got a jet plane moving around like that at this level, and I'm hearing the sound there, it doesn't make sense. It would make sense, right? So that, if it's like that and then you go underneath the aircraft, then you hear that sound. That makes sense because you're walking and you're crouching and going underneath and then you hear it, so to speak. It just had bad sound continuity. It just random load of rubbish in sound mixing. That's all it was. If that movie was to get nominated for whatever, I think, nah, rubbish. It shouldn't even be nominated for sound. It was a total rubbish mix. It's just your average. It's not like Gravity. Gravity, no, that's a better mix than Top Gun. You don't have to have stupid airplanes and all that, and propaganda with blowing things up and all that, because that's all it is. That movie is just a load of, like Top Gun, load of propaganda, BS. The sound mix on the first Top Gun's even a bit complicated. I bet most people probably can't even hear most of the sound details on the left and right channels in Top Gun on their home theatre. I'm aware of the sounds and how you got to have the centre channel level adjusted very carefully so you can still hear dialogue. And I don't understand why most home set theatres, they're bragging with their clip speakers and all that, and then they start saying, I can't hear the dialogue. Well, if you can't hear the dialogue, right, which I think is BS, right, because you can. It's just not the same as it is in a large cinema auditorium where it's amplified. All the levels, typically on dialogue in a cinema, on average loud passages are about 85 dB. You try doing that on those little speakers, they're going to crack up. They can't do it. You got to get cinema PA speakers, and then you try doing it with proper cinema PA speakers, but it sounds then a little bit over loud, sort of thing. So you got to adjust it to fit the room size, just as a large cinema auditorium is very loud for that auditorium size. Then you play the same movie in a small auditorium a couple of weeks later. It's in a small auditorium. It's the same print. It's the same transfer, only it's playing in a smaller size auditorium. And it's adjusted. If that was adjusted to be 2, it wouldn't fit the size of the auditorium. It's overpowering. Films are only fabricated, and all the bass that you usually feel pressing them against, that doesn't happen in real life. That's exaggerated. We kind of think, that has to be expected in a movie. Movies should have today, realistically, they should have more output channels specific for bass reproduction, bass shakers as well, so that they shake the seats specific to what is actually happening. Like, you can't have like two people punching each other, like Indiana Jones with those stupid sound effects. You just don't hear that in real life. It's impossible. That doesn't happen. That's just to like wow it, so to speak, you know. But you wouldn't feel it. Two people punching each other at this distance away, you wouldn't. It's impossible. If it was a point of view, so like it comes round and push like that, push like that, yeah, push like that, you should feel it in the bass shaker, like a POV, point of view, so to speak. And like, oh, yeah, it's like being, because you see that. There's one movie, I think it's called something Henry or something hardcore Henry something, and it's mostly a point of view movie where I haven't played it in a while. I only watched it once, and as far as I can remember, it had dialogue panning or in-head kind of, like, you know, sort of that sort of sound I think it had, but it was mostly POV sort of thing. So when you get things like that in movies, that's when you should have the bass shaker give that, you know, through with maybe a little bit specific in sub bass, because getting the tuning right and such, so it does that, so to speak. But if it was say an earthquake, and that's difficult depending on where the camera's positioned. If the camera is above and it's an aerial view looking down, you shouldn't feel any shaking vibration, because it's impossible. That earthquake is ground based. That's happened. Epicenter is miles under the ground, and it's you get the P wave moving at the speed of light, the speed of sound, and then it's minutes or minutes after you get the S wave, the seismic wave that conflicts all the damage, and that wave is going this way, that way. It's moving in different patterns, and that's why you see the movie San Andreas, and you see this ground motion effect, but you're hearing all the rumbling still from the helicopter point of view. That's inaccurate. That's a bit BS, really, because you wouldn't. When it's ground sort of playing with people running around, that's when you should feel the floor, you know, with bass shakers and fitted in a floor or such, so you feel vibration. Not so it's going to break the house down or something or whatever, but you get a sort of, similarity. Otherwise, if it was up to a level where it can, you're going to have a damaged home. Because what's the point of that? No one wants an earthquake now, do they? I don't know why people thrive for watching movies like that in earthquake zones, and I don't understand the mentality. It seems like, are these people literally all psychotic? Because they're not right there in the head, you know, because once that earthquake unleashes, and depending on the magnitude and the time duration, you got a lot of damage. But that's what you should get, that sort of effect. And if it was, say, like going underwater, so to speak, you should get a low frequency, equal pressure coming from special subs. Wow. Never, my cat Badget Bear's being Satan, mate. He's being very Satan, demon kitty. You would have you get what I mean, right? LFE 0.1 is just not enough. You know, they say there's an LFE 0.2, but I don't believe there is, because they say the Denon can do LFE 0.2. But they say it can only do it with a specific, I'm not sure if it was Aura 3D or DDSX or maybe some Dolby Atmos, but I haven't seen it appearing on the AVR like a second signal, like an LFE 0.2. It says subwoofer 1, subwoofer 2, blah blah blah, black sheep. Have you any more sub bass? Yes sir, yes sir. But we've got BS really here, you know. Otherwise you might as well just use a cheap Behringer DCX, put a single sub bass signal in LFE, and then you've got outputs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and you can keep adding on. You adding on and adding on. You still only got an LFE 0.1. You're just spreading that signal around the room. Wow, look at my cat Bear go. He's been really the cat today. You know why? Because I'm talking. And if I was in the room, he'd be bolting in and out of that room, and it's really annoyingly distracting. But look at Bear go. Anyway, I'm going to stop. Anyway, I rambled on here, rambling for about 40 minutes, over 40 minutes now. So I'm going to load this up, make you think. You see, make you think. I'll lure you in, right? And I'll make you think.